This video is sponsored by PCBWay. Hey there, this is Seth Schaefer from Team Just Cause Robotics and Team Bots and Stuff Robotics. Today's video will cover my experience during the 2021 filming for Battlebots Season 6. I made a similar video in 2020 about my experience competing with Bloodsport and the BNS team. This year I helped out with Bloodsport and Retrograde before filming started, but the new BNS robot Retrograde ended up being my main focus during the time I was in Las Vegas. First off, arrival. Filming for competitors was longer than the live audience, officially opening on August 20th. Between the guys working on Bloodsport and Retrograde, we had 4 hotel rooms at a hotel a short walk from Caesars Entertainment Center where the whole show was filmed. With the exception of the first couple days before fights started, the pits were open from 7 a.m. to midnight, and we were there working on our bots the vast majority of that time. Lots of long days and sleep-deprived nights. On the 22nd, I walked over and had to wait for the COVID testing to get set up, and test negative before being allowed into the pits to join the rest of the team. From then on, I stayed the entire rest of filming, so I was there for every single fight that took place. Before you ask, yes, I know the full list of competitors who were there, and who won the giant nut, and no, I can't tell you. The arena was set up inside the main building, with 2 huge temporary buildings erected next to it. The largest of these was the pits, where all the work on the bots took place, and where I spent the vast majority of my time during filming. There was also a small air-conditioned battery tent, and next to this, an electric welding area, the grinding area, and the 2 test boxes, which were shaded but not enclosed. Haas CNC machines were set up in the pits along with a bandsaw and drill press for all teams to use. Later on, the Tormach mill and lathe from Long Beach were brought in. The battery tent, the pits, and the main building were all air-conditioned. However, only the main arena building had running water with real bathrooms, so we had to use outdoor temporary honey wagon bathrooms and sinks, which was not particularly pleasant. Also, the entire floor being plastic plus the humidity somehow caused the entire floor to be the absolute worst possible conditions for static electricity. Every time you touched metal tables, a door handle, or another person, you'd get a painful shock. I'm pretty sure multiple teams had electrical components die because of it. It was really bad, and they really need to address that next year. The bots! Once I got to the event, it was clear that both Bloodsport and Retrograde needed quite a bit of work before they could fight, and Retrograde was a bit short-handed, so I volunteered to help out there. Little did I know, Retrograde would be my life for the next 2 weeks. The captain of Retrograde is Aaron Lucas, and in 2019 and 2020, he was the weapon operator for Bloodsport. He's also an accomplished engineer and works as a mechanical engineer for his day job. Don't worry, Bloodsport is back in full force this year with Justin Marple remaining captain, but let's talk about Retrograde. Retrograde is a brand new robot designed by Aaron. Aaron's a world champion Vex Robotics driver, so he's controlling the robot's 4-wheel drive system and the lifting arm at the front of the bot. However, Retrograde also sports an undercutter on the back, which was controlled by teammate Katie, who helped the Bots and Stuff team massively by acquiring sponsors for us this year. Speaking of sponsors, this video is sponsored by PCBWay. PCBWay offers quite a few awesome services such as PCB assembly, CNC fabrication, and 3D printing, which are all very useful for building BattleBots. Justin Marple designed some custom PCBs that are in both Bloodsport and Retrograde, which help manage the receiver communication and add sensors to our weapon motors. I've also used their CNC fabrication service for my 3-pound robot Shrapnel Mine. Check out PCBWay at the link below. Retrograde also has a flamethrower attachment, which we used when we had to wait for it, and I had the privilege of controlling it myself. The insides of Retrograde are actually a bit similar to Bloodsport, and you might recognize these aluminum electronics boxes that I machined for both robots, being the same between the two. In future videos, I'll talk more about Retrograde, but for now, let's focus on the competition. COVID protocols. Like last year, we were in the midst of a global pandemic, which sadly led to quite a few international teams being unable to attend. Unlike in 2020 though, there was a mask-wearing live audience in attendance in 2021. I forgot to mention before, but both competitors and audience members either needed to test negative for COVID or prove they had been vaccinated long before being allowed in. Competitors needed to test negative even if we were vaccinated, as was the case for basically everyone on our team. During the 2020 filming, vaccines weren't available yet, so it wasn't a requirement obviously, but in 2021, while it wasn't exactly required, it was extremely strongly encouraged that everybody who was competing on the show get vaccinated. If you haven't been vaccinated yet, I would highly encourage you to do so. The Pfizer vaccine, which I received, has been fully approved for use by the FDA. It's no longer just an emergency approval. So, it's been extremely thoroughly tested and ensured to be safe and effective, even against the Delta and Omicron variants. I've gotten all 3 shots and never experienced any side effects besides being kinda tired after the last 2. But I digress. Filming. The way the competition was filmed was in sessions. There was a noon session from noon to 4 p.m. and an evening session from 6 to 10 p.m. Towards the end of the competition, I got to sit in the stands as an audience member for one of the full filming sessions with a teammate, and we got to enjoy the show like the rest of the audience. It was pretty cool to see the fights live, and in the future, if you have an opportunity to attend the taping, I'd strongly recommend it. As a competitor though, I was way too busy to do this most of the time. The live show has the expected breaks in the action for everyone to get in position for the next couple bots to get loaded in. Sometimes these are very long breaks where Chris and Kenny are going to redo some lines or add commentary for intros and breaks. It's cool to get to see them do it all live, especially Farouk's intros, which can be pretty long and some are nearly tongue twisters. He has to redo some of them over and over to get them right, but almost every single one he nails on the first try. It isn't a perfect experience though. During breaks in the action, they always play music and try to keep everyone entertained as best they can, but you'll occasionally have pretty long breaks between fights. The TV show will present you with 7 fights in a typical 2-hour episode with ads. In real life, they scheduled 10 fights for every 4-hour session, meaning the fights happen only every 24 minutes on average, and you can't just fast forward real life. It's also always possible for a fight to get pushed to the following day, even if it's scheduled for a given day, especially when there's a fire, a bot doesn't work when loaded in, and the bots need to get ready for their fight and it's pushed back. Retrograde and our team plus our opponent showed up for the last fight of the day once, and then our fight was pushed to the following morning due to unforeseen delays. It's not too uncommon for a bot to need to fight twice in one day, which is what happened to us after this incident, and in rare cases even more than twice. That may not sound like a lot if you haven't worked on a big bot before, and I imagine many of you watching might have built an insect weight robot and think, oh yeah, that's easy. But you have no idea how much work it takes to maintain and repair a Battlebot. I think it's time that you learn about what the actual fighting is like from our side of the screen. All of us builders were honestly pretty frustrated with the way that production communicated with us this year. There were a lot of issues, which were partially improved towards the end of the competition, but for the most part we learned who we were going to fight at 2 a.m. the night before. Many robots take hours to configure for specific opponents, so this was a big problem for everyone throughout the competition. When we finally found out who it was that we were going to fight on the following day, we would watch every single past fight of theirs we could if they had ever fought in prior seasons, and try and strategize based on their prior performance and driving style. If this was a bot that had competed in competitions outside of Battlebots, we would watch those too. Some competitors have fought before at Robo Games or Robot Ruckus. Once we could actually get into the venue the following morning, the real work began. We obviously also took a look at their bot and talked with their team sometimes openly to learn what their design was like or improvements they've made since prior seasons. Some teams are open, others are a bit more secretive. Once we had an idea what to do to combat our opponent, it was time to configure the bot. Retrograde was a brand new bot, but we still had a ton of options to suit different opponents, like a defensive wedge to fight horizontals, shorter and longer forks for the frame and the lifting arm, and top forks we could add or remove from the lifting arm depending on if we wanted to flip our opponent over, lift them up, or just push them around. For Bloodsport, we have weapons and front attachments, various types, numbers, and lengths of front forks, and of course, our selection of weapons. If you're now thinking, wow, you guys must get paid a lot for all this hard work and such expensive robots, think again. I've got a whole video from Season 5 where I surveyed over a dozen teams and broke down how much money we all lose from this, and exactly what costs are covered by sponsors and the teams themselves out of pocket. It's definitely worth a watch if you're interested. I'll put a card above and a link in the description. Before we could get our bot into the arena for our fight, we needed to wheel it over to the battery tent and get all the batteries in. With Retrograde and Bloodsport, we both have more than 6 batteries we need to insert into the robot. We then taped or zip-tied every single connector that we had just plugged in on the whole robot, methodically checking them all over, and then we went over to the official weighing scales after getting the top back on. A production staffer would officiate the weigh-ins before a fight, and then we would be instructed to go to a test box and perform a pre-fight functional test. Prior to having fought once, all robots had to pass rigorous safety inspections, and the test box staff ensured failsafes were working for all the systems on the robot, and made sure we had appropriate ways of locking our weapons and turning the bot on and off without being in harm's way. The flamethrower system on our bot and on any other robot that had a flamethrower, there was a special pyrotechnic guy whose job was to check for gas leaks and any other issues with those. I ended up being one of the people comfortable with turning the robot on and putting myself in the danger zone, so I was always the one to do this before tests and fights. Retrograde has 2 drive and 2 weapon switches for the 4 independent battery systems. I also had to fabricate a lock for the weapon arm on site, and we made a super long switch key to turn the bot on out of reach of the huge lifting arm. Once that was all set and the box was locked, we could spin up the undercutter, drive around, lift things with the arm, or what have you. Any issues that needed to be solved resulted in a trip back to the electrical tent, undoing all of the dozens of top bolts, undoing all the zip ties and tape, pulling the batteries out, and wheeling the bot back to the pits, which was a lengthy process. Instead, we usually opted to run and grab a tool bag and have what we needed to work with us on the bot in the electrical tent with the batteries. We always disconnected the batteries safely, but we would leave them inside the bot for speed's sake. If everything worked, we then wheeled up to the arena to wait for our fight. Alright, now let's talk about fighting, and get to the good stuff. As I said, I cannot spoil anything like who we fought first or any individual matchups. Still, in any case, both robots that were going to fight would wheel up to the entrance and park near each other, and the teams then had time to chat with each other or psych each other out. When we were next to fight, we wheeled up to the red or blue square ramps and followed the directions of production. Aaron and Katie would be outfitted with microphones before this time. We usually discussed strategy and what I should or shouldn't point out to Aaron during fights. The fights themselves, even right next to the arena, are actually not all that loud unless a bot like Ice Wave or Minotaur is in the box. The loudest thing is the pulverizers slamming into the floor and shaking the whole floor. Before our fight, we would line up and follow the producer's instructions on the ramps to do our walkout after Farouk introduced our robot. This can be awkward at times because we would basically get a long Farouk intro, walk out, wave to the crowd, and then Farouk would record a second short intro while we're standing there, and we need to be all smiles and wave at the crowd again as if we had just walked out the first time. After that, usually I was donning safety glasses, wheeling the bot on its cart into the arena, and for every retrograde fight, I was tasked with turning on the bot. This can be extremely nerve-wracking, as I'm always worried something might go wrong and need to be prepared to react fast if it does. I wasn't able to walk up to the arena side for Bloodsport with any of its fights this season, but I did for all of retrogrades. After switching on our 2 drive and 2 weapon switches, I removed the safety locks and got back to the driver's box. During the fights, sometimes I was just an observer, sometimes I was in charge of the pulverizers, and sometimes I got to operate the flamethrower on retrograde, which was super fun. During a fight, of course, it's a massive adrenaline rush, even if I'm just watching. It's an experience you'll never forget. To see what happened during the fights, you'll just have to tune into the show on Discovery Channel, starting January 6th at 8 p.m. or on Discovery Plus. One huge thing you don't get to see is if there are judges' decisions, they sometimes make you wait an incredibly long time worrying about who will win. After the fights, they sometimes would film an interview with both team captains, other times the loser's not interviewed at all, and they obviously don't air every interview in either case. While the post-fight interviews are going on, the safety team use our switch keys and weapon locks to turn off the bots, make them safe, load them onto their own carts, and wheel both bots outside of the arena. Then we would walk out and inspect the damage on both our bots, pull off the lid, unplug the batteries, wheel back to the electrical tent. This brings us to repairs. If you compete on Battlebots, the vast majority of your time is probably going to be spent on bot repairs. First off, we're not allowed to have any lithium polymer batteries in the pits. We needed to go over to the battery tent and put batteries in the bot before we could test, and take them out before we could wheel them back to the main pit area. Keep in mind, the weight limit at Battlebots is 250 pounds. Testing the robot requires at least 3 people just to lift it on and off the cart. Retrograde's lid takes a minimum of 5 to 10 minutes to remove with 3 people. And if we then test and need to fix something, we need to wheel the bot back, remove the lid and batteries, before wheeling all the way back to the pits again. With 6 batteries to connect and disconnect, and not always having 3 people to help take the lid off quickly, this is easily a half-hour long process just to get batteries into or out of the bot. Getting the bot turned around for another fight takes several hours at a minimum, so fighting twice in one day is a seriously intense thing for pretty much every single team who doesn't have a second fully assembled bot. At Norwalk Havoc competitions in the 3 pound to 30 pound class, you have 20 minutes for repairs between fights. But at Battlebots, if a bot gets really seriously damaged, 20 hours might not be enough time to get it in fighting shape again. Because of this, the filming schedule includes dark days without fights, so we have more time to repair. Trust me, we were working around the clock almost every single day, whether there was a filming schedule or not, to maintain this robot. Getting up at around 6 a.m. and working until midnight was not uncommon. I sometimes needed the hospital to make parts for us, sometimes I'd modify a part myself with the Tormach machines. We sometimes needed to wait on overnight McMaster orders or parts, or drive out to stores to get things ourselves on super short notice. It was really intense, but it was still an experience that I don't regret at all. That's not to say the event wasn't fun, however. The people and the community at Battlebots are the main thing that makes it all worthwhile. While it was a huge amount of work and I got precious little sleep, I really enjoyed getting to meet and hang out with the Bloodsport team again, and met and became fast friends with an all-new group of people helping with Retrograde. I also got to go around and talk to the captains and teammates on plenty of other teams. The whole Hijinks team, especially Orion Beach and their electrical engineer Chaz, were super friendly and explained to us at length pretty much everything about their bots design. I spoke for a while with Victor Soto about Rotator, and as always the endgame team is a friendly bunch, with Nick coming over to use our hydraulic press or just to chat multiple times a day. I tried to take the time to talk with as many teams as I could about their bots. Battlebots is a massive repository of some of the best engineers from around the globe. And despite being busy working on their bots, some teams, like Mad Catter, were more than happy to spend an hour or more meticulously telling me about every single motor, controller, how their frame was designed to go together and still be serviceable, etc. Needless to say, we learned a ton that will hopefully go into future versions of our bots. I'd like to give a quick shout out to Scotty from the Strange Parts YouTube channel, who I spoke briefly with and he was super nice and awesome to meet. And another huge shout out goes to Mammoth Captain Ricky Willems, who was more than willing to go out of his way to help us out on the Retrograde team in multiple occasions when we were having issues with chains and sprockets. Battlebots is a very unique competition in that every competitor really wants to help you out, even if you're about to fight them. We all want to win, but more than that, we're all there to put on a good show. And having your opponent barely move or not have a working weapon at the start of a fight is a super lame way to win. We all have the same passion for robotic carnage, and very few teams are secretive about their designs once they show up at the competition. Sure, there may be occasional shenanigans, but nobody would ever sabotage another team, and are happy to lend their competitor a hammer, screws, sprockets, or whatever helps get them back into the arena on short notice. This is true about robot combat at all levels. If you want to get started in combat robotics, please don't start with a 250-pound bot that costs as much as a car. Start smaller, with the 3-pound class or even a 1-pound or 150-gram weight class. I have a whole website and this YouTube channel dedicated to helping new builders get involved, with tons of guides and tutorial videos on all kinds of robot-related subjects. So if you want to compete, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon on this channel to get notified. I'll link below to a playlist of all of my existing tutorial videos, which is a great place to start. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for watching.